This video is sponsored by Monopoly Go. One of my favorite things in writing is the little unintended consequences that an author cannot possibly consider when putting pen to paper. It's tiny stuff with big implications, like, do orcs have restaurants with menus?
It looks like meat's back on our menu, boy. No way, God.
Was Chip from Beauty and the Beast born as a cup, or has he been a baby for 10 years? No matter how good you are as a writer, there will inevitably be unintended novelties like this that arise in your story. But my favorite examples of these happy and sometimes terrifying little mistakes are from video games. Now, just so you understand, I'm a hopeless gamer. I had to pry myself away from my Switch just to write this script. I've always been like this, and I probably always will be. I literally remember the exact moment that I got my first video game ever. It was a surprise. My mom got me a Game Boy Advanced with Sonic Advanced already inside. I was standing in my living room when I turned it on. I remember being right next to the kitchen. I remember being entranced by Green Hill Zone, glued to that screen, which is ironic because it was all uphill from there. In the more than 2 decades since that moment, I have poured in probably what amounts to, shamefully, thousands of hours into video games of all makings. Whether it's Super Smash Bros., yes, all of them, Civilization, Tropico, Pokemon, Fire Emblem, Crusader Kings, The Last of Us, Call of Duty, Budokai Tenkaichi, I have sweet little memories of them all tucked away between my ears. But I don't think there are many games as close to my heart as Skyrim, and it has one of the best examples of those unintended little story moments that I talked about before. Picture it. It's September 10th, 2011, and it's 1 minute until midnight. Your dad has graciously driven you to a GameStop to stand outside in the cold with 36 other nerds, because your dad's a bro. And then that clock ticks once more to midnight. And Todd Howard's cultural nuke hits North America.
This is Skyrim running on the 360. We have a brand new engine we've written for the game, all new graphics, all new gameplay.
But there is another game that took the world by storm 2 decades ago, and it's persisted to this day. It's got a shiny new coat of paint and keys to the internet, so it's my pleasure to introduce today's sponsor, Monopoly Go. I don't know if there has ever been a more emotion-inducing board game in human history, and it's pretty much been revolutionized to go on your phone. Monopoly Go offers short and sweet gaming sessions of 5 to 15 minutes so you can play at your leisure. You can play with your friends or go online to show some strangers how it's really done. They changed up the formula a bit too, with collectibles and cards and albums that you can browse and see grow. There are also mini games that are new basically every day that you can play alongside the core game. There are also tournaments and prize drops that you can interact with, along with rewards that you can get from monthly events. Right now, the game has this awesome event called Anniversary Treasure Digs, where you get to excavate cool tokens, shields, and other items. Not to mention that there is a co-op mode now, so you can be on a team with friends, build cities, or even a whole empire. I absolutely love seeing my progress visually grow in a game, so it's a really cool feature to see my cities grow one property at a time. It is something really impressive. Monopoly Go is always right at your fingertips. This is the kind of game that's great for road trips, plane rides, or if you have a little bit of time to kill while you're out and about. I really wish I had this on my recent flight to Houston, actually. So if you like gaming, use my link in the description below or scan the QR code to download Monopoly Go and unleash your inner tycoon. But as cool as Monopoly is, I don't think it tickles the same spot in me as Skyrim does. I sunk 500 hours into that game in 18 months, give or take. I didn't even like fantasy before Skyrim. I hadn't even played an Elder Scrolls game. But the hype for Skyrim pre-release was real. They had dragons everywhere. And I love dragons. And you could basically play as a human or elf or lizard dragon. And that was enough to convince me. One of the coolest parts of Skyrim is honestly just the idea of the Dragonborn itself. Not only are you in a fantasy Viking land with magic and warriors and an entire country to use as your sandbox, but you are a legendary, once in a 1,000 years hero who was literally born with the soul of a dragon. And not like, oh, you're strong and fierce with the heart of a dragon. No, I mean, you just actually have a dragon soul, just in a mortal body. From the get-go, putting the player in this position makes them feel extraordinary inside an already fantastic world, and then it just sets you free. You get to choose your fighting style, your armor, your companions, your magic, a quest line, a lot of it. Honestly, I don't know why I'm explaining this to you guys. The game's been out for like, what, 10 plus years now? You all know it. Vampires, werewolves, dragons, oh my. And through all of the adventure, the mystery, and the action, you get the sense through your power that you really are a legendary hero. Once you start Fusro-dawing people into orbit and plucking dragons out the sky, the game really makes you feel like Spider-Man. I mean, the Dragonborn. Alduin, while not being the most compelling villain even in his own game, is enough of an existential threat to cement your role as the hero of the story. As the Dragonborn people praise you, fear you, respect you, want to be like you, and have you on their side. It's because you're the hero, you're the good guy, you are the messiah that's supposed to free Skyrim and maybe even all of Tamriel from evil. From a game design perspective, always being at the center of conflict and tension really reinforces the thematic idea of you being like a legendary hero. No matter what questline you decide to do, the impact of your decisions is much bigger than just you, and that brings about a grand sense of heroism for the player who is constantly overcoming conflict. And again, that is a really cool feeling to instill in a player. It's the ultimate power fantasy, not just to be able to be stronger than everybody else, but to be a beacon of hope and light for the good of the world. Except, and this is pretty wild, all these game design choices, while objectively a great experience for the player, have some pretty unintended consequences from a writing perspective. What I mean by that is, even if the Dragonborn were created from the ground up to be a hero, they are also, objectively, horrifying, and would be a villain in any other scenario. To understand this, we gotta think about the dragons though. Dragons in Skyrim aren't just animals. In fact, they are explicitly sentient, highly intelligent, and individualistic. They're basically like people, except partly divine, so I guess better than people? Dragons are the children of the god Akatosh, and have their own will, thoughts, ambitions, emotions, and beliefs. This really should go without saying, mainly because we meet the dragon Parthenax and see that dragons are not all bloodthirsty villains. Every dragon is its own person, and when dragons die, their souls go to whatever the dragon version of Sovereign Guard or heaven is. And with all this in mind, also remember that the dragons were hunted to near extinction by mortals. They were seen as tyrannical and almost innately evil, so they were exterminated. So now, let's consider the Dragonborn. He is a mortal, specifically made to kill dragons. But that isn't even the scary part. When the Dragonborn kills a dragon, he reaps the dragon's soul and absorbs it into his own. Just think about that. To the dragons, the Dragonborn isn't just a killer, he's a soul vampire. He exists to hunt you down, kill you painfully, then traps your soul in his clutches so that you can't pass on to the afterlife. From a dragon's perspective, that is 100% terrifying, and I would definitely ally with Alduin against that. Like, just consider if instead of dragons, the targets were humans. Like, imagine some Khajiit who was called the Humanborn, who existed to hunt down the last remaining humans, and he kills them in a world where the afterlife is objectively real, mind you, and then he eats their soul so they can't go to that afterlife. This would be a villain in any other story. And funny enough, this type of thing is not uncommon for writers designing super heroic characters. In almost every case, the hero is the main character, meant to embody some mix of admirable traits or justice or righteous vengeance or just overall protectionism. And the enemies are almost always portrayed as innately evil or immoral, or at the very least, good targets for violence that shouldn't be sympathized with. Think of a game like Uncharted. You are the daring, charismatic, legendary explorer and hero Nathan Drake, and you want to find some treasure. But these pesky mercenaries keep getting in your way, so what are you gonna do? Not kill them? They don't really give you a choice, do they? Well, if you take a step back, you do murder a lot of guys. Like, a lot of guys. Like, a lot of guys. Hundreds, maybe thousands across all the games. And you have to think, Nathan Drake is just one guy. And like, not even a guy with superpowers, he's literally just a man. And he's mowing down entire armies of people. Like, from an outside perspective, a guy killing 5 or 6 mercenaries on his own is pretty scary. We would think that guy's like a John Wick type. But if we heard that a guy killed 500 mercenaries, we would think that's like an Avengers level threat. But Nathan Drake kills hundreds and hundreds of men, and he just like keeps putting himself in situations to do it. You would have to assume that after a while that he enjoys the killing, like it's a feature of the adventure and not a bug anymore. Like, if I knew my last 2 adventures resulted in me killing a town's worth of men just in a single stop, I would like have to consider whether or not I should keep going on adventures. Perhaps I would think potential treasure and fame isn't worth all the human suffering I cause. But the game constantly makes it appear that Drake is the hero of the story, because I guess technically he still is, but he's just terrifying. Which is also crazy because the game itself also recognizes that Drake really doesn't have any moral high ground when compared to the villains.
Drake, how many men have you killed? How many just today? That's it, boy. No compassion, no mercy. Do it!
Funny enough, modern fiction outside of video games has sought to recognize and provide commentary on this trope's presentation. While I think it generally failed, Game of Thrones attempted to play upon the hero is actually horrifying when you step back trope with Daenerys. Naruto became the legendary hero of his story, and later on, the show recognized just how terrifying he would be from the perspective of his enemies. And of course, most recently, we've had the retelling of Dune, where Paul is hailed as the voice of the outer world, but it becomes like very clear from Chani's perspective that it's not something to be thought of positively. It's actually pretty cool to see the idea of a heralded, infallible hero meant to deliver us from evil be then interpreted as possibly just a manipulator, or the leader of a cult, or just someone who shouldn't have blind adoration thrown at them. The hero is only a hero because he's on our side. I talked about a little bit of this in my Gojo video. The only reason we like him or other heroes is because they are murdering our enemies gruesomely and not the other way around. But there is actually a game that I think plays with this trope purposely super well. Shadow of Mordor and Shadow of War are games that set themselves up perfectly to represent this trope and then subvert it later. You are Talion, who has merged with Celebrimbor, a violent ring wraith. You are the legendary hero because you alone can take down Sauron and his orc army. And these orcs, they're mindless, bloodthirsty, innately evil enemies that deserve neither mercy or consideration. It's the perfect setup to allow the player a power fantasy to take down scores of enemies without feeling bad about it at all. But then the game, seemingly intentionally, goes out of its way to not only humanize the orcs with personal stories and characteristics set up with the Nemesis system made for the game,
Suffer me now!
But also to make your hero character as comically evil as possible.
You shamed me! Me! I hate being shamed!
These orcs have like friends and relationships and dreams and goals.
You shamed me again! It's all gotten worse! The things the other Uruks call me, you can't imagine!
And you are, best case scenario, slaughtering them, and worst case scenario, taking their free will away to make them your slaves. The things you do to these orcs are unspeakable. I'm not even being like hyperbolic here. You can terrorize orcs until they are mentally disabled. That's like really sad. And again, the game recognizes this and just gives you the option to actually become outright evil. There's no smoke and mirrors anymore. You just get to become recognized as the monster you always were. And I think it's really cool that the story ends up aligning so well with your game actions. Creating a compelling story for any type of fiction, whether it be a video game, TV show, manga, or beyond, is an insanely difficult task and deserves praise when accomplished. But for all the details that writers put in, sometimes it's the details that they didn't mean to include that end up becoming the best stories. Anyway, thanks for watching all the way until the end. If you like what you heard, leave a like, comment, and subscribe, and also make sure to check out our sponsor for today, Monopoly Go. If you want to be a real homie, check out my Patreon, or if you want to hire me on as an editor, go down to my website. I'll put a link in the description along with my Patreon and also my TikTok. I also stream live on YouTube 3 days a week at 6:30 p.m. Sunday, Thursday, and Tuesday. It's out of order. But I am there, and I'd be happy to talk to you all. As always, it was a pleasure, and I'll talk to you all again soon.